A lot of uncertainty today's world. It seems like everyone's questioning everyone, can't figure out what gender everyone is, what pronouns to use. But how can we build for tomorrow with confidence?
You are listening to Wealth Talks with the McPhees. We're back in the studio today. 7 out of 10 Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, with many of those people earning over $100,000 a year, but they're still living paycheck to paycheck.
That's a little bit scary when you think about it. $100,000 is nothing to laugh at for an income, and yet those people still live paycheck to paycheck. I know I talk to a lot of people, $100,000, $120,000 a year. They have zero savings.
Wow.
And that's troubling because savings is so important, not only to give ourselves a sense of self-worth, but to be able to have the liquidity when opportunities happen. But savings is what builds the research and development that creates true progress. And if we don't have any savings at all, we are in a nation of decline, like a very popular political figure keeps saying.
Yeah, well, I was reading just the other day, too, that an income of $100,000 a year, if you look at, cities where incomes tend to be higher than that, New York City, San Francisco, well, the cost of living in those places are higher as well, and so are the taxes. And so in order to end up with an income of $100,000 in cities like New York or San Francisco, you have to earn over $300,000 in order for it to feel like a $100,000 income. So this paycheck to paycheck thing, it applies to a lot of people, a lot more than we might think. And it makes it hard for, with this mentality, just living paycheck to paycheck, it makes it very hard to plan for tomorrow with confidence.
Well, it's interesting that a lot of people think, oh, if I could just make more money, then I would be able to save. But that's not true. We have prospective clients and clients who make a very low amount, and yet they are still able to save and to create a better financial future for themselves right now, a better economy for themselves right now and for the future. And then we have people that we meet that have very high incomes and they just can't save. So it's not a matter of what the money is, it's a matter of what they choose to do. Their principles, if they want to bad enough.
Yeah. What is the cash flow?
Absolutely. Yep. And in America today, we have to be really frank here. There's no place in America today that if you want to save, you can't, regardless of where you live, whether it's in San Francisco or whether it's in New York City, whether it's in LA, because we know people that earn very little money that live in those cities and do very well. Mm-hmm. And then we know people that live in those cities that make lots of money and aren't doing very well at all.
Yeah.
So really, it's just, kind of what's going on between the ears here is what is it that you want to do and what choices are you making for yourself?
I think a lot of it boils down to what Nelson Nash used to talk about. He talked about once something is experienced as a luxury, it easily can become a necessity. And he used to talk about the way he'd take his grandkids for a ride and how they were really curious that windows actually rolled down with a handle that rolled instead of an electric button that you pushed.
Yes, and air conditioning in a car, we just expect it.
Yes.
I certainly enjoy it very much, but it is more of something that we consider a necessity rather than a luxury.
I remember the first air conditioning unit that I saw was in 1965 when we drove from Oregon all the way through Texas to Houston in the middle of summer without air conditioning in our car, and got there, and there was an air conditioning unit in my aunt's dining room, and we all huddled around the dining room table because it felt so neat and cool that cool air was coming out of that air conditioning unit.
Yeah. It's amazing.
So, and we're not suggesting that we go without air conditioning but just realize that we have plentiful abundance here, and we have to choose to limit ourselves in some way at some time in order to save to create a better future for ourselves.
Of course, the other side of the coin is these people that believe poverty is a virtue, and struggle with being minimalists in a society where it would be, it actually puts a strain on everyone else.
Yeah, that's what was going through my mind when you said they're a minimalist, because I've seen examples of minimalists where it does put a burden on other people. They don't take the packaging at the store. But there's a lot of behind the scenes where that packaging gets disposed because it had to be used for them anyway. So at least they're not taking it home to have to pay for the disposal, but it's still, they're being minimalist isn't reducing their what am I looking for?
Their consumption.
Yeah, it's not reducing really their
footprint.
consumption.
Their footprint is still just as big, even though they believe they're being frugal or minimalist.
Or maybe they're not taking the responsibility for some of that.
It kind of made me think
consumption.
the other day when we were at Costco, Michelle. The guy asked us, do you want a box for this? And I said, no. We always say no.
I have said no for many, many years because I found that if they put all my stuff in a box, I would be tempted to lift it. And my husband is a chiropractor, and I knew that was not a good thing for me.
But the assistant said, I don't blame you. He says, they always ask me, and I say no too, because all I have to do is I have to go home, and then I have to put it out at the garbage container. Let Costco do it for us.
Yeah.
The footprint is the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as people are saving, there are some benchmarks that have been established, according to conventional financial wisdom, that by the time someone is in their mid-30s, they should have at least 1 time their annual income in savings. By the time they're in their 40s, they usually want about 3 times their annual income in savings. By the time they're in their 50s, that should be about 6 times. By the time they're in their 60s, 8 to 10 times their annual income. And yet most of the savings that people are doing for the future, and oftentimes this is building up to retirement in the conventional sense here, but the type of savings that people are doing for retirement is often in their 401k. If we look at median 401k balances across the nation for people age 55 to 64, that's only about $89,000 and some odd dollars. I think it's like $89,700 that's in these 401ks. And so most people are way undersaved for the future.
So let's talk about median value, because a lot of people confuse that with average. And median really says that when that median number goes up, it means that the people in the higher incomes are probably saving most of it, because the median is taking everybody's 401k account and counting up to 50%, the very middle, and saying, okay, that's the median.
Okay.
Whereas an average is that we would take everyone's savings and divide it by the number of people that had savings. And that's going to give us typically a higher number.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if we look at average savings in 401k balances, the average savings in a 401k balance today doesn't have as much value, even though it's more in dollars, than in 2007, simply because of inflation.
Yeah. And something to realize, too, is all that money in the 401k, not only is it eroded by inflation, like you're saying, but it's not even all yours. You still have to pay taxes on it
Yeah.
to be able to get it out and use it. And it's not all your money that's sitting there.
I think about that when I'm helping people figure out their net worth, and we go through, the value of their home, the value of their car, their possessions, what they have cash savings checking account. Then we get to the 401k, and they're give me the amount that it is, or at least that it was last week. And I write that number down, but always going through my mind is you've got half that.
Yeah.
Maybe half that. And that's only today, because tomorrow if the market goes down, well, then you have much less.
You bring up a great point there, the volatility.
So then to be fair, I have to say that tomorrow, if it goes up, then you have more.
Sure.
But what if it goes down? And this happened in 2008 to a lot of people. In fact, I was talking to someone on the phone the other day. They said my sister was 65 and in 2008. And she lost half of everything.
We don't even have to look back as far as 2008. 2022 is really a huge decline percentage-wise.
Huge. 20
well.
to 30% of people's savings just disappeared.
Yeah.
Now,
Before that, you had 2020, which in the shadow of 2022, it looks kind of small. but that was a pretty big decrease as well.
So you're right, John. You know, we don't have to go back that far. And just think of the hardship of someone who was already retired and now they lost 80% of what they were going to live on.
Yeah, or who's not quite retired. And this is, maybe they were going to retire next year, and now that is delayed because of this big market decrease.
Here's something that really always used to fascinate me when Nelson Nash would talk about rates of return. And people would always come up to him and say, well, I can earn a higher rate of return somewhere else than in life insurance. And the truth is, that is absolutely true.
Yeah, absolutely.
However, Mr. Nash wasn't talking about rates of return. He was talking about something that he referred to as a tailwind. And a tailwind is something that just pushes you a little bit faster, a little bit farther than everyone else that doesn't have a tailwind. Just imagine bucking a tailwind, driving all the way to Oregon on one of our trips. Our mileage decreases in our vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
And if that wind is blowing the same direction as we come back from Oregon, we get better mileage because we're coming the other direction, and now we got a tailwind pushing us.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing in an airplane. It's the same thing in a lot of areas. It's the same thing that happens when wealth is in a family. People get a tailwind because now the children don't have to start from scratch all over again. And that is something that's being lost in our country, is that people say, well, I want my kids to pull their pants up by themselves. I'm not going to give them a boost. Well, that is actually going to make our life here tougher too, because money that's not kept in a flow and moving and circulating is going to affect our life. And it's also going to make a difference for the next generation. Mm-hmm. And that's not what America was all about. America was, our founding fathers said, we're going to, swear all of our wealth, our health, and our sacred honor to make the next generation better.
Well, we were talking about no air conditioning in cars earlier. And how many of those people who are saying those things about their children want to drive their family in a car without air conditioning? Mm-hmm. Because, maybe they want them to experience the same thing they had when they were young, and yet do they want to sacrifice and not have the air conditioning in the front seat?
Yeah, I walked to school in snow up to my hips barefooted,
Yeah, so when we realize that we hold back the economy of other people like that, then we're actually holding ourselves back as well.
Yeah. That's a good point. And I think what it comes down to then with our money, you mentioned, higher returns are available in other places, but we also have to realize, and I think this quote has been attributed to Warren Buffett or Will Rogers. I can't remember exactly who, but it says the return of my money is more important than the rate of return on my money.
That's Warren Buffett and Will Rogers both said that. Okay. Because if you lose your money, now you have to go back and start all over again to get it. Mm-hmm. A rate of return, if you don't get your rate of return that you were expecting, that's okay.
Yeah. So in preparing for the future, one of the tools that we've found to be very helpful to people, regardless of their income level, is the 10-20-70 rule, where you take 100% of your income, 10% of it, the 10 of the 10-20-70 is yours to keep. 20% of it, no more than 20% of it, should be going to pay off creditors. If you don't have creditors, then that means, congratulations, you can save 30% without having to work any harder or change any of your lifestyle, which is the next section of the 10-20-70, the 70%. That's your lifestyle.
And, a lot of people want to struggle with that and say, well, the first 10% belongs to the tithe, to the church. And yet, Paul told Timothy, when he wrote to him, he said, the farmer should be the first person to take the rewards out of his harvest. Mm-hmm. That first 10% belongs to us to manage, because everything we own anyway belongs to God anyway, but it's for us to manage and keep, because as the richest man in Babylon talks about, those are the seeds that is going to create wealth for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if you want to do a tithe of 10% or 15% or 8%, whatever you're giving in tithes or giving to charity, whatever you want to give, that's part of your lifestyle. That's your choice of the way that you live. And so that would come out of your 70%.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Taxes are not so much of a choice. And so usually I take that out before I do the 10/20/70 calculation, but you can do it either way. The important point is that you're using a system for it, that you have a form of accountability. Even the exact percentages and numbers, the 10, the 20, the 70, are not so much important as to the fact that you are actively looking at each of those buckets and making sure they are balanced in your life.
And here's the bottom line. Everybody that has ever taken us up on this challenge, and we've talked to people that are making minimum wage up to millions of dollars a year, if they're not keeping anything, and we challenge them to keep 10% of what they're making, within a matter of months, they are shocked at how much money they have.
Yeah.
Yeah, the ones who take us up on it. There's some who don't. There's some who do not follow through with that challenge. It's too much for them, and we don't hear back from them. But the ones who do take us up, wow, they can't believe what they did. And one of my favorite stories is a young woman in New York. She had never saved before. She worked on, she was going to work on 3 months of savings, and that included over the holidays. And I said to her, wow, you have really got a challenge here. And I think we touched base in January. She said, I need another month.
Okay.
So the holiday time was a little bit difficult for her. But after that, she said, yes, I've been able to save this. I can purchase a policy at this monthly amount. I know I'll, be able to do this. And she's been doing that for years. And the last time I talked to her on the phone, she was shocked to hear how much she had available for her use in her policy if she needed it. She didn't need it. But it was there for her and building. And, that she's living in New York. She's a young woman. She's able to do this too. So when people tell me, "Oh yeah, I just can't save," I think of that woman, and I think you could if you want to.
Yeah. Well, we'd like to lay claim to this 10/20/70 principle, but it's not ours. It's been around since 1933 when George Clason wrote The Richest Man in Babylon. And that's a book that we highly recommend everyone read.
Yes, very, very good book. The Richest Man in Babylon.
It's less than probably a Starbucks cup of coffee to go buy. Okay.
I think you can even listen to it free in an audiobook on YouTube.
Yes.
I tried to listen to it one time. I couldn't get through it. The version I had was not good. So if you get a version that's not good, try another version because you just don't want to lose. You don't want to have an audio that's not connecting with you because it is such a great book. Lots of little stories set in ancient Babylon. And hey, I use this as a read aloud with my kids. It's a great book. Lots of great principles in there. The 10/20/70 rule is in there. Used by a college professor with his own finances. That was the story in there. So that is a great book. Lots of good principles in there. And then since we're going to be talking about financial books, why don't we talk about the financial books that have really inspired us and that we think are really important for people to read?
Yes. So you talk about the 10/20/70 principle also in your new book, A Biblical Guide to Personal Finance. That's pages 139 to 141 in the application chapter. We're talking about applying these principles. And we have a tool on our website, life-benefits.com, that helps people run this 10/20/70 evaluation for your own finances. So you can download a copy of this tool either in an Excel sheet format or use Google Sheets if you don't have Excel. And you can put in your numbers and the graph will automatically adjust so you have a snapshot of what's happening right now. Go ahead and save that and then come back in a few months and do it again and see how the numbers have changed. It can be a nice benchmark.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about a client we talked to just a few months ago. She was telling us that she said, I just love the 10/20/70. It's so simple. It's so easy. And it makes so much sense. And she was talking about some, she's also a real estate investor and she's, done different programs with different companies and different softwares. And she said, but this one, it's just so easy. And I can do it. It just makes sense. It's simple. And, hey, if we can have simple and it works.
If things are simple, they tend to get done.
Yes.
So I think one of our clients said that one time. We even quoted it on the podcast. It's really true. So that book, A Biblical Guide to Personal Finance, it breaks down a lot of different concepts and makes them simple. the things that you can apply in your life. So you can get a copy of that book on wealthtalks.com.
Oh, yeah. And we also have a downloadable study guide. It's a free download that goes with the book. So that's a great a resource to have with that, great for studying and so that you can understand and apply the biblical principles to your personal finances.
Of course, we can't get away without talking about the book Becoming Your Own Banker by Nelson Nash, The Infinite Banking Concept. That book was transitional for us. We changed dramatically what we had been doing financially. We had been paying cash for everything for years. We'd bought a house by paying cash for it, thought we'd won the financial world because a lot of gurus say, oh, pay your house off. That didn't spell financial freedom for us, and there's reasons why. You can read about that in our book, Prescription for Wealth or Winning Your Financial Game, either one of those books, because Winning Your Financial Game goes through the 20 concepts that we've been taught that we need to think different about if we really want to produce the wealth that is going to sustain us and to boost the next generation.
That was key what you said right there. We need to think different about. This weekend, you and I went out to breakfast and we looked up on the wall and you said, oh, Michelle, that's a good quote. And there it was. Albert Einstein, you cannot solve the problems with the same thinking that created your problems.
Wow, that's a good point.
That's right. We have people that have told us they read this book, Winning Your Financial Game, every year to remind them of the things that they're told are true that just ain't so. And that's a Will Rogers quote because...
Well, that's a paraphrase of this quote.
Yeah. It is really amazing how many things people are told are true that aren't. Mm-hmm. And not that there isn't partial truths in some of those things, but the partial truth is almost worse than a bold lie if you're not getting all the details about it. And, a book that I almost didn't read, but went ahead and read anyway because I didn't like the person who wrote the foreword to it, and that is Thou Shalt Prosper, the 10 Commandments of Making Money.
And that's by Rabbi Daniel Lapin.
Yes, and that just goes through some of the Jewish traditions of why money is really part of mankind. We really can't separate ourselves from it. And we need to realize that because by managing money, we are actually creating a better world for ourselves and everyone around. It's a great book. It's a great read. And you'll come away with a fuller understanding of what money really is by reading that book.
Yeah, that's a great book. I think the subtitle of it is 10 Commandments for Making Money, a play off the original 10 Commandments, and some great information about the Jewish mindset approaching money. It's often remarked about how such a large percentage of the American Jewish population is well-to-do, and the Jewish population makes up a very small percentage of the overall American population, so they have considerably more wealth demographic-wise than the rest of Americans. And so a lot of that Rabbi Lapin thinks has to do with the mindset that the Jewish people approach money with. And so he shares some of that with us.
We've had Rabbi Daniel Lapin speak for us a few times. And I remember the very first time he spoke for us, he got up and he really surprised the audience because he started talking about Fiddler on the Roof and how it was the most anti-Semitic movie because in there, Tevier sings, "If I Was a Rich Man." And he said, no Jew would sing that. They would sing, "When I am a rich man." And so that's part of that, that mindset of being able to picture yourself as being wealthy and having money and, kind of the Jewish mindset behind that has driven many Jews to really create a lot of wealth. And some have done it shabbily or shadily, and others have done it well, just like all of mankind. There's good and there's bad, and there's samples of any occupation, any man, any woman. There's good examples, there's bad examples, but they really have the mindset that they should be wealthy. And And that's why we named our book Prescription for Wealth, Why You Can and Should Be Rich.
This last weekend, we were asked to speak to a group of people that was hosted by an immigrant to this country 50 years ago. Came to this country to come to school, found the love of his life, got married, set up business here. And he mentioned, when people come to America, we work and we get wealthy. And that's something that is lacking in American culture today is the work ethic. And so when we're looking around at what ethnicity in America today is the number one group, the Indian population from India that's coming here is now the wealthiest population ethnic group in the United States because they come here willing to work, hard to work, and before they know it, they're wealthy.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it's a mindset.
It's a mindset. And
a mindset followed by action.
And, even though we're seeing a lot of erosion of our liberties and stuff, America is the land of opportunity. And if we're willing to work and not expect something from nothing and apply these principles that we're finding in these books that we're talking about today, people can become wealthy. And the reason why wealth is so important, again, is when we either save that wealth, it makes progress happen because there's research and development and ingenuity that comes because of that money being saved. If we hoard that money and keep it out of circulation, though, then we haven't done anything, even ourselves, any good because it will devalue because of inflation. And so it's very important that we understand the concepts behind becoming your own banker and prescription for wealth and the biblical guide to how to keep money flowing and growing, because we do have a responsibility that, yes, we can harvest, we're supposed to multiply, but we're also supposed to replenish. And those are things that oftentimes are forgotten when people start making a little money. It can change our attitude and we can become very greedy and we can become very self-centered.
Or forget to pass those values on to the next generation. That's something that we've seen a lot too. One generation will do very well financially, and then those lessons are lost on the next generation, which squanders the accumulation, the progress that the previous generation had made. And this is this is human nature. It's probably not going to change anytime soon out there in the wide world, but it does happen, on an individual family level. You can have generations that do get the message and are able to perpetuate the vision. And that's one of the reasons that you wrote How to Build Sustainable Wealth. Because sustainable wealth cannot just be a flash in the pan and gone the next day. It has to be generational in order to be sustainable. And so you share some lessons, some challenges that are being faced in our economy today, for people who want to preserve the wealth that they have accumulated, and then also some solutions in the second part of the book.
I think we can't conclude this podcast without a little warning, like the small letters at the bottom.
Is this a disclaimer part?
A lot of people will come up to us and say, oh, and this has happened last week. Oh, you must be really wealthy. Well, that's not our focus. Our focus isn't to get really wealthy. I remember the story about the Hunts sitting on their front porch, and one of them says, let's get rich, and the other one says, no, let's get filthy rich. And they did, but the J.B. Hunt family had a lot of tragedy in it, too, because they focused on money. Money's not our focus. It's just a tool to do more of what we're here to do. And the more we can manage, the better we're able to do that. So when we start focus on money, the scripture warns us that if we put our hopes in money, then it will disappear and it won't bring the happiness and the joy and the pleasure that we will have if we use money like it was intended to be used. We can't just hoard it up for ourselves and say, now I can kick back and relax. And that is the American attitude, is how much can I get saved so that I can kick up my heels and go fishing for the rest of my life?
Well, that brings us to the very favorite passage of all my children when they were writing a story from the Bible and illustrating it. They loved the passage of where the man says, "Oh, I'm going to tear down my barns and build bigger barns, and then I'm going to kick back and tell my soul just to eat, drink, and be merry." And, the Lord says, "You fool, today your life will be required from you." And they love to draw a picture with a fire in the barn and love to illustrate that. But that's really true. We're just doing this all for ourselves, self, and just focusing on what we can accumulate to just to kick back. And then that's not getting us anywhere. And it's very empty. We've known people who have accumulated a lot, but then they're empty.
Yeah.
It can cause turmoil in families if it's not accumulated right. It can cause bitterness and anger and hate.
People often develop health problems too in that whole process.
But when money is recognized for what it is, just the value of the service we've provided someone else, it takes our focus off money and puts it back on how can I serve more people?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
How can I do better at serving them?
And with money, we can serve more people than with less money.
And we shouldn't ignore the money, because the money can be an important measuring stick of that service.
Yes, that's true.
And that's something that a balance, a perspective that has to be maintained. Yeah, for health.
So even though there's a lot of craziness going on in the world today, there's still the truth that we can hold on to. So take advantage of these resources. Get on Amazon or someplace and get The Richest Man in Babylon and the 10 Commandments, Thou Shalt Prosper, the 10 Commandments of Making Money. Go to our website, get our books that we've mentioned today.
Yeah, you can get those books at life-benefits.com or wealthtalks.com. We'll get you the links to the last two books, How to Build Sustainable Wealth and Biblical Guide to Personal Finance.
And a couple of those books are audiobooks on our website
They
too.
are,
So if you don't like to manually read, you can listen to them. But the truth of the matter is that the principles that we've shared today briefly, in detail in these books, are going to help you create a life that brings much more joy and happiness and fulfillment, because that's what we're here for, is to serve other people. Money is just a result of our service to other people.
That's right. So you are listening to Wealth Talks with the McPhees. You can always reach us at 702-660-7000. Have a wonderful week, and we'll be back next week.